Recognize Ms. Clark for her 5 minutes of testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you, Ranking Member. I sincerely thank our panel of witnesses for both their service and their testimony here today, and I'd like to extend that gratitude to the women and men in the federal enterprise under your leadership. Last Congress, I partnered with my colleagues in the Senate and across the aisle to enact the Cyber Incident Reporting for Critical Infrastructure Act, which will give the federal government the visibility it needs to identify malicious cyber campaigns early and better understand the tactics of our adversaries to prioritize risk reduction investments. Incident reporting is a critical tool in our ability to defend ourselves, but it is not the only place we need to invest time and resources. Competing incident reporting frameworks will undermine security, not enhance it, because it forces a disproportionate focus on compliance with various reporting regulations over security and incident response. The Cybersecurity Incident Reporting Council has acknowledged as much. Secretary Mayorkas, the Cyber Incident Reporting Council has identified duplicative federal cyber incident reporting requirements. The National Cybersecurity Strategy continues to task DHS with harmonizing the federal cyber incident reporting requirements. How willing are DHS's federal partners, including independent agencies, to do the work of harmonizing incident reporting requirements? And are you concerned that multiple inconsistent reporting requirements could frustrate the security value of incident reporting?
Congresswoman, this is a very important subject in a domain that is only becoming of increasing significance to the security of our critical infrastructure and our country writ large. One, we are receiving excellent cooperation from our federal partners with respect to the Cyber Incident Reporting Council and its effort to harmonize reporting requirements. It is a challenge because there are also independent agencies that have particular mandates, and they perceive sometimes those mandates requiring a different process, a different timeline than other departments and agencies do. We are all driving towards the same outcome of a cyber-secure America, but there are some tensions with respect to particular jurisdictions, and we're working through them and everyone has demonstrated impeccable motive.
Very well. Director Wray and Director Abizaid, I remembered like lemonade. It was stuck in my head. What do you make of the fact that the U.S.-based persons who are primarily responsible for terrorism threats here in our homeland? I'm sorry, let me back up here. Let me start. Okay. I am struck by an unclassified NCTC product entitled Foreign Terrorists Inspired, Enabled, and Directed Attacks in the United States since 9/11 as of February 2023 that identified 47 attacks and concludes that of the 47, 41 involved U.S. persons. I hope that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are paying attention and will recognize that their fixation solely on threats coming over the southwestern border is dangerous. We cannot lose sight of the threats right here at home, and it is urgent that we work to counter radicalization of U.S. persons. So again, my question is, what do you make of the fact that U.S.-based persons are primarily responsible for terrorism threats here in our homeland, and how difficult does this make it for the FBI and CTC to detect and thwart possible attacks? And are you having to shift your counterterrorism approach to accomplish this?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It goes right in line with my testimony here today, which is that the heightened threat environment in the United States is being driven by individuals that are inspired to act. I think you've rightly outlined the number of foreign terrorist inspired, enabled, or directed attacks since 9/11 here on U.S. soil, and most of those have been inspired attacks. Some have been enabled, some have been Only 3, I think, have actually been directed by foreign terrorist organizations. So that history, I think, is an important sort of context for the heightened threat environment we're dealing with here today. That said, part of the reason that we've had that level of success is because of the very clear priority we've placed on screening, vetting, watch listing, terrorist identities, known and suspected terrorist databases on the classified side that really support border security efforts writ large.
My time is up, Mr. Chairman. Again, as we move to Thanksgiving next week, I give thanks for you and the work that you do, and to all of those families that sacrifice on behalf of the American people. Happy Thanksgiving to all my colleagues, and I yield back.
Well said, Ms. Clark. Thank you for that. The gentlelady yields. I now recognize Mr. Luttrell, the gentleman from Texas, for his 5 minutes questions.
Good afternoon. 19 terrorists in September 2001 killed 3,000 of our citizens. And then last month, Hamas fighters invaded Israel. Ms. Abizaid, do we have a number on how many Hamas fighters came into Israel? Do we have a round number on that?
I don't have a number for you.
Mr. Ray, you know?
I don't.
Almost a month passed, although we don't have a good accountability on what those numbers look like.
I'm sure we can get those for you. I don't have them for you today, but it was a sizable number in to a shocking degree.
So how many deaths in Israel last month, total civilian?
Well, we've seen the Israeli government revise their casualty estimates down to around 1,200. Again, a shocking number of deaths.
How many hostages remain?
There are over 200, is my understanding.
Mr. Ray, do you believe that in America or globally there's a war on fentanyl?
Do I believe there's a war on fentanyl?
Yeah.
I think there's a whole of government effort to combat the scourge.
Just the sheer number of
epidemic
deaths
fentanyl.
that we see daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly.
I'm sorry, I started.
I would just say sheer numbers that we're losing to fentanyl. And as a military man, I would think that loss would calculate a sheer conflict. So my question is, do you consider our challenges against the fentanyl crisis a war? Or is that too bold of a statement?
No, I don't. I mean, look, I think bold language is appropriate when it comes to fentanyl. I will tell you that on the FBI end, when we are making gang arrests, we have seen over and over again violent gang arrests, more often than not now, include fentanyl seizures. That's all over the country. That's just one metric, but it shows the degree, along with, for example, the case that I mentioned in Boston in my opening statement, just shows it is a routine thing now for our people working with our partners to be making seizures of fentanyl that in one seizure would be enough to wipe out an entire state.
I would add sex trafficking to the war as well, given the sheer numbers of individuals that are being held across the globe. Ms. Abizaid or Mr. Ray, how many known groups or individuals in the United States are we monitoring for terroristic activity that we need to be concerned on? And Mr. Mayorkas, I know Mr. Pfluger asked you these questions with that chart, but we're concerned that is there a substantial amount, again, 19 for 9/11, let's just say 200 maybe Hamas fighters came into Israel. Those are very small numbers compared to the damages that they inflicted. So are we actively engaged on any terroristic watch list inside the United States that provide a absolute risk or threat right now?
Well, let me try to answer the question this way. We FBI have, through our 56 Joint Terrorism Task Forces, have active investigations that relate to Hamas, that relate to Al-Qaeda.
You said that very eloquently earlier, sir. I hate to cut you off.
Okay.
You don't have to repeat yourself. My concern is I want to know, can I go home and tell my people in Texas that we are in a safe place? There's no viable risk that we need to be concerned about right now, giving just the numbers that have come across the border. Mr. Mayorkas, these numbers you get hit in the face with this every day. So I'm sure you know them well, but in 18, we had 6 known registers, then it goes down to 3, 22, went up to 98. This year it's 172, and already in 24 fiscal year, we're at 13. So again, this is a worldwide threat to the homeland. My concern is, are we missing something? Where is our blind side? Is there one, and are we addressing it? Either one of you.
So, as an intelligence professional, we're always concerned about the gaps that we have, about the global terrorism environment. For my part, we're very focused on foreign terrorist organizations overseas, what we can learn about their plans and intentions, and the degree to which they have tried to seed operatives here in the United States.
Are you seeing them seeding those or sowing those threads here in the United States?
We do not have credible or corroborated indications that they are trying to seed operatives into the United States for terrorist purposes through the southwest border or other borders. That doesn't mean we're complacent, and it is a risk that we monitor and we evaluate every day.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, I guess you mentioned in your opening statement, and I mimic Ms. Lee's statement about 4470 passed the House. Passed out of the committee through the House. It's sitting in the Senate for CFATS. In your opening statement, you mentioned Shepherd, Texas. Do you know where Shepherd, Texas is?
Not precisely, Congressman.
I was kind of hoping you would say yes, because I'm sure you wrote your opening statement. Well, Shepherd, Texas, that's my district. I didn't intentionally think you were going to you would throw darts at me after our discussion, and I want to thank you for coming to my office after the first time that we met. You said you would do that, and you did. So thank you very much. But that facility in Shepherd, Texas, a Class A facility, very small. And do you know how the explosion happened?
Not precisely, Congressman. I'm aware of the fact of the explosion and how it underscores the criticality of the CFATS program.
It does, and it's human error is how that inevitably the explosion happened. But I don't know if you're aware of this now, but that facility is not under the CFATS regulation. And I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I thought you were talking directly to me when you said that, so I wanted to make sure that you were aware that particular facility does not, even though we support CFATS, that one does not live in that space. But thank you. And again, thank you for coming to my office like you said you would do.
Thank you, Congressman.
Gentleman yields, and I think Ms. Titus has asked to defer to Mr. Strong and then come back to her, so we will grant that request. The gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Strong, is recognized for his 5 minutes testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Mayorkas, I want to follow up on Representative Pfluger's question. In August, CNN reported that a human smuggling ring containing at least one individual with known ties to ISIS was responsible for bringing a number of Uzbek, which is Uzbekistan, migrants to the border who were subsequently released into the country. And I do have that document, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to add that to the record. Unanimous consent to add this. Thank you. After learning of the ISIS connection, the Biden administration has been scrambling to determine the whereabouts of these Uzbek individuals. Secretary Mayorkas, has the Biden administration determined the whereabouts of all of these individuals? Have they all been detained? Have they all been vetted?
Congressman, we vet and screen individuals whom we encounter at the southwest border, number one. Number two, individuals who pose a threat to the safety of the American people, who pose a public safety or national security threat, and whose release would advance that threat, are in fact detained. They are in immigration enforcement proceedings, and they will be removed if in fact they don't have a basis to remain in the United States.
Have they been detained?
There are those who have been detained because, in fact, we cannot be assured of the safety of the public. And I would be pleased to provide you with greater details in a different setting.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. As you know, the non-intrusive inspection system program is critical for detecting illegal drugs such as fentanyl and other illicit contraband hidden inside cars, trucks, and cargo entering the U.S. Legally through ports of entry. Secretary Mayorkas, you have stated in recent testimony before the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee that DHS has surged resources to our ports of entry as it relates to NII systems. However, DHS own numbers tell us that with the NII system, only approximately 2% of passenger vehicles and 17% of cargo vehicles are even inspected for the detection of fentanyl and other contraband. Do you really consider that a surge of resources?
Oh, Congressman, we have surged not only the deployment of technology, the non-intrusive inspection technology known by its acronym NII, but we have also surged forward operating labs to be able to analyze controlled substances that are interdicted And if, in fact, we identify them as fentanyl, then we take the appropriate prosecutorial action specific to the attempted importation of this incredibly fatal
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I
opioid.
reclaim the time. Thank you. Director Ray, I appreciate your candor when you testified last year that the border represents significant concerns to the FBI. Since then, the number of illegal border crossings, gotaways, and those on the terrorist watch list attempting to cross into the U.S. has continued to balloon. Would it be safe to say that the situation at our border is still of significant concern?
Well, certainly the concerns that I articulated last year remain very much top of mind for us.
Thank you. Director Ray, I know that it is not your border policies that have gotten us here, but I would be remiss not to mention the strain that the open border puts on your workforce and their ability to carry out the FBI's primary mission. But that is not what I want to talk to you about today. In your testimony, you mentioned the threat posed by criminal syndicates and nation states as it relates to cyber. Specifically, you spoke to the threat posed by the Chinese Communist Party in this arena. I was glad you briefly mentioned earlier the impact of advanced training in cyber. Can you speak to the capabilities of the FBI Redstone in Huntsville, Alabama, and specifically the role that Huntsville plays in combating the unique and evolving cyber threats posed by our adversaries?
Well, thank you, Congressman. I am incredibly excited about everything that's going on in Huntsville, including, in particular, we view that as where we're going to have be the center of gravity for our advanced training, especially high tech, especially cyber, especially innovation. We've been down there numerous times to check on the expansion, and we're now up to, I think, about 1,900 employees down there. 19 different headquarters divisions have people there, so it's a hub of activity, and especially on the cyber side, I think it's going to be a very important part of the FBI's future.
Like I say, I appreciate that information. We're very proud of how it has worked there at Redstone. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and the chair now recognizes Ms. Titus for her 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses, especially Secretary Mayorkas, for being here today. As I'm sure you know, it's exactly 1 year ago today that we sat in this hearing with these exact same witnesses, the exact same issues, the exact same questions, and here we are, and this committee's done very little other than talk about the border. I want to thank you first, Mr. Secretary, for working with me on the Sears decision. You know, this week is the week of the big race in Las Vegas, and we worked at my office with your office very hard to get the security level raised to a level 2, and that's been done, and we appreciate that kind of cooperation. Also, I've introduced a bill to codify that program. It's called the Special Events Program and Support Act. It's bipartisan, and so I hope we can continue to work together on that, because I think that will be a good next step. You know, we listened to the story of the threats and who's threatening us and how they're threatening us and where they are and where they came from. You know, right now we're talking about what's happening in the Middle East and how it has been translated to threats or violence in this country. Before, it was talking about it in the wake of the Supreme Court decision on abortion issue. So it seems like the methods are the same, but the motives change by just whatever is politically on the agenda. And it must be like playing whack-a-mole, how you deal with the threats. Would you tell us kind of what you have in place to adapt or adjust to what the current news is that's bringing out perhaps a new group of these kind of homegrown terrorists?
Congresswoman, is that a question directed?
Yes, or Mr. Ray, either one.
I would say that the two leaders seated with me and their colleagues in the intelligence and law enforcement enterprise are the best in the world. And that gives us visibility in terms of the threat landscape and allows us to operationalize the measures to meet that challenge.
I would say that we rely heavily on partnerships, state, local, not just with the federal agencies here, but in particular with state, local law enforcement, with the community, with the private sector. in order to be able to try to anticipate where the threat's going, so that we go to where the threat's going to be and not waiting to always be in a reactive posture. Our goal is to be ahead of the threat, and partnerships are the critical ingredient in that. Again, not just within the federal government, but with all those other very important stakeholders.
I know we have a fusion center in Las Vegas where you have a strong presence as these agencies, but also the private sector. Nobody has more security than gaming does, that eye in the sky, so I think they are valuable partners. Excuse me.
Yeah, I would just add to what my colleague said that, we have a workforce combined across our different agencies that is just full of tenacity. And their job is to not sleep on threats. Their job is to understand, be curious, and evaluate every single report that comes in and take it seriously and understand whether it reflects a real and credible threat and whether it reflects a changing trend in the kind of dynamic that we're facing here in the country and globally. And so we're really proud of that tenacious workforce.
Congresswoman, if I can just add, because Director Ray used a term that is incredibly important, that it's the term of partnership, because it indeed is correct. It's not just across the federal enterprise, but with our state, local, tribal, territorial, campus law enforcement, with the private sector, and also, very importantly, with our international partners. It really does require a community of action.
Thank you. I would ask you, Director Ray, about something you kind of expanded on in this report or your statement today from a year ago, and that's international organized crime, the retail crime that we see, organized retail crime. We're going to see more pictures of that as we go into the holiday season, the smash and grab, the shoplifting that then the money is turned into human trafficking or drugs or guns or whatever. Can you tell us a little bit about how that's a priority for you?
Well, we are in a number of states supporting our state and local law enforcement partners who are really the first line of defense on that. But to the extent that there are national connections, national networks, to the extent that the crime that you're describing contributes to some broader organized criminal activity, then we're actively engaged. And in some states, for example, we have dedicated task forces that are focused just on that issue. It is something that is heavily concentrated in a few geographies in particular, but it's starting to become a more national trend.
It's not just big box stores anymore, it's small stores. I was in a drugstore and somebody came in, just raked off the eyelashes into a backpack and walked out with them. Now, eyelashes aren't power tools, but it's a problem at all levels. So appreciate you kind of keeping an eye on that.
The
Thank you. I yield